Welcome everyone to our webinar on the new dam safety rules. Many of you know we've been working on these for several years, trying to work out, bringing them up to current practice, make things simpler, that sort of thing. So we welcome you for joining us, and I'll go through a few logistics. Switch that. So as the announcer, all of you are muted. You can, we're going to have several question and answer breaks, and you can type in your questions as we go along into the question box there on your toolbar, and we'll try to either answer those as they come in, or at our break sessions. And we are recording this, so if you do know some people who couldn't attend, or if you miss part of it or don't catch part of it, you can we'll post this to our website once we're done. Then we do have also on the toolbar, there's a handouts section. We've uploaded 3 files that might be helpful, and that Casey will be going through in this presentation. One is the ARC file, and that just really does show all of the strikeout and inserts and how we got from what we used to have to what we have now. And then if you just want to see the current rules, you can download Chapter 73, which will have all of the current effective language. And then we've also put in a copy of today's slides for you. I'm John Garton. I'm currently the supervisor of the floodplain and dam safety section. And I'll turn it over to Casey.
Thank you, John. And I am Casey Welty. I'm the lead dam safety engineer for the Iowa Dam Safety Program. And we also have Ashley Kimball, who just has started with us this year, who is also a dam safety engineer. And we will today, just a quick outline. We're going to talk about a brief history of where our rules were and how we got to where we are today. We will also go through the new rules and what changes have been made, the new thresholds, what kind of submittals we have, design requirements. We'll touch on some honor responsibilities that have changed from our old rules. And as John said, we will take questions throughout the presentation. So our quick history of rules in Iowa. The Dam Safety Program was started back in the 1970s. It generally is the same now as it was, or yesterday was the same as it was when it was written back initially. There had been some small updates and some small reference changes, but basically the rules have remained the same. In 2017 is when we started to come up with changes. We started a technical advisory committee that was with 7 different consultant engineers and the NRCS and the DNR, and they gave us some suggestions and provided feedback on what they thought could be different with our rules as they were. We took that feedback, produced this rule packet, and sent it to stakeholders for review, which maybe many of the people on the call had seen, hopefully. We sent those out to get feedback before we started the whole rulemaking process to get any big changes up front. And then in 2020, we actually began the official rulemaking process, sent it to the Environmental Protection Committee and the Rules Committee and the Governor's Office, a few legal reviews on the way, and finally it got to where it is, and code editors changed some wording, and then finally that got it to where it is today. So today is the effective day of the new rules packet that are in the handout section and on our website. So our goal with the rule changes was to do a consolidation of all the different chapters. We had different dam rules scattered throughout 7 chapters in the Iowa Administrative Code, and we have combined them all into Chapter 73, which is a section only for dams. We also used to have 2 separate applications with redundant information that needed to be submitted to get the water storage permit and the floodplain dam safety permit. And now that has been combined into the same single application. So there was a bunch of different rule chapters. The floodplain rules were in 4 different chapters, 70 to 73, with definitions and thresholds and criteria. An external reference document, technical bulletin 16. And none of the water storage rules were in those chapters. Those were separately in chapter 50, 51, and 52. So we've moved all that into chapter 73 just for dams. So our new rules are all contained in chapter 73 for dam construction. The approved document, the ARC 5988C, is the document that shows the changes to each rule section, what was removed, what was taken out, what was changed, and what was inserted. Mostly it's a big removal of sections and a replace with chapter 73. So there's not a whole lot of strikeouts. So today we're going to kind of step through this document, which shows the changes, and then we can talk about each of the changes that impact designers and owners. So the first thing in the definitions, major structure category classification has been removed. Now every dams are classified only by hazard potential, not an arbitrary size or storage volume. That doesn't relate to the hazard of the dam. Low-head dams have been replaced. The term low-head dams has been replaced with structures and materials across the channel. It used to be called low-head dams and dams other than low-head dams, which was a little bit confusing. So now if there's a dam that does not exceed the thresholds that we'll talk about later, it may be a structure or material across the channel in the future. And that is in the miscellaneous obstruction or floodplain section for the thresholds. Typically, the larger river dams will be classified as a dam. It would take about just an estimated size, a 12-foot tall low-head dam on a river, 80-foot wide, with a stream slope of 0.25%, would meet the thresholds, the new thresholds that we'll talk about in a little bit. So generally, low-head dams will have enough storage to fall under the dam's thresholds. And what used to be called low-head dams and now is materials across the channel, it has the same criteria that it did before. We've just changed the title and moved it. Well, didn't move it, just changed the title. So now in chapter 73, the first section, division 1, is scope and definition. So what is a regulated dam? We have new simplified thresholds. The old ones were there was a lot of them. They're very confusing. They didn't match other states. The new thresholds will match the National Inventory of Dams, and it also matches other surrounding states. And we don't have a separate urban versus rural separation between thresholds, and we no longer have a with or a without auxiliary spillway threshold. We used to have a bunch of, in presentations from the past, a whole bunch of different slides that showed all the different combinations of urban, rural, auxiliary spillway or not. Moving, because we did top of dam and permanent storage. So we've gotten rid of those. We have our new thresholds. They're easier. There's only 3. The height, if it's greater than 25 feet, if the storage at top of dam is greater than 50 acre feet, or if it's high hazard, then it's a regulated dam. There are some minimum cutoffs just in case it's a really tall dam in steep terrain that doesn't have volume behind it. So there's a minimum of 15 acre feet. And for the storage threshold, there's a minimum height of 6 feet just in case it's a big flat pool that has a 3 or 4 foot tall berm that just doesn't have enough height. And then all high hazard dams. That does make it a little more complicated, but now it's easier to estimate different hazard classifications. Breach models are easier. We have LiDAR everywhere. There's some online tools that we can estimate some breach flows. But generally, if a dam does not meet the height and storage thresholds, in order to still be high hazard, it will need to be really close to it, right upstream from a development or right next to a major road to be able to cause a threat to loss of life. We do still have the roadway exemption that was in the past, but we changed it a little bit, the wording of it. So now it's an exemption for roadways, roadway embankments that serve a purpose commonly associated with a dam. So if it's really a roadway with a culvert that's not intended to provide flood control, that would be exempt. But if it's a roadway that has a drop inlet structure, or it looks like the goal of it is to serve the purpose of a dam, then it still will be regulated as a dam. Can't just throw a road on top and call it not a dam. So permits are needed for new dams or modification of existing dams. The upgrades would be required for high and significant hazards, need to meet current design criteria. And low hazard dams that have changed, or low hazard dams that were designed initially as low hazard, but have changed to a higher classification, to significant or high, those would need to meet their new design criteria for their new classification. But a low hazard dam that's in good condition right now would not need upgraded to meet the new design storms and new criteria for a dam, as long as the hazard classification doesn't change, or as long as it doesn't need modifications. So the hazard classifications, we have changed the definition slightly. They still have the same intent behind them, but just the wording of the definitions have changed. For low hazard, we're checking to see that there's no probable loss of life and that there would be low damages due to a failure. We changed moderate hazard to be called significant hazard. It's just a changing of the title just to match FEMA's definitions and what other states use for this particular hazard. It also would be no probable loss of life expected during a failure. It would cause damages to structures. It could impact roadways. in it could cause significant economic or public damages. In the past rules, we used to have an significant hazard included water supply and development dams, but those should fall under the significant or economic public damages. If, for instance, a water supply dam was to fail, maybe there's nothing downstream, but it would need to be rebuilt, and that would be significant damage. Similar to a development dam in a large development may cause significant economic or public damages just to rebuild the dam. And then high hazard classification will be a dam that failure would result in probable loss of life. So that was our first section on some low head dam changes, hazard classification changes, new thresholds. Do we have any questions on this part?
Don't see anything that's come in yet. So I guess we can keep going, and then if someone does get one typed in, we'll take it at the next break.
That sounds good. So the next section, Division 2, is the section of rules that has the process for approval in application. So the first step, we added that you can apply online to the rules. You already could, but we added the wording that you can apply online in our new permit application. It will be just one application for the dam with one approval process. It's not separated into the water use application system and the permit system now. Just a really quick demo on the permit tool. You just hit submit application. You choose if it is a dam, you'll choose project type dam. You can choose some options that correspond with our thresholds. These have been in the tool since we launched it. When we made this new tool, we knew that we were working on changing the threshold, so we set it up to include the process for the new rules. We're working on getting these changed so that eventually you could pick the 0 to 6 foot or 0 to 5.9 foot option, and it would tell you no, you don't need to apply. But right now, everything for a dam says yes. After you choose your project type, pick where you're going on a map, where you'd like to build the dam, and then hit get results, and it will tell you yes or no if you need to apply. Then once you have applied, you can submit your application materials. We've changed, it used to say in the rules that you have to submit final plans, final documents with your application. We've changed it so that you can submit a preliminary application packet with a design report, hydrology and hydraulics, your hazard classification, a set of preliminary plans and geotech report if you need it. And we can we'll review that preliminary application and agree or provide feedback on your basic design info before you spend the time to develop the plans into final design set. We've got a checklist that has the same information. And then we'll review the preliminary application, without final plans, without signed plans, and then submit the final submittal once you have your final design report, signed drawings, operation plan if you need it, easements if we need to get those, and then an emergency action plan for the high hazard dams. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. And we split it up into separate submittals so that we could give concurrence on the big items prior to creation of final plans. People were already doing it similar. This just puts it in the rules that you can do them separately. You could also, if you didn't want to do it separately, you could submit both preliminary and final information in the same application. The water storage permit is needed for all regulated dams. It does include the $75 fee that hasn't changed from before. We removed the 18 acre feet permanent storage threshold, and so it applies to every regulated dam. And the criteria for approval of the water storage permit remain the same. It just needs to provide a beneficial use and not adversely affect protected flows. And it's not a separate application. And we're finalizing the payment process for that fee. Currently in the water use database, it accepts online payments, but we haven't incorporated that yet. So right now, it will need to be a check mailed in or a phoned in credit card payment, which were also both options previously.
All right. We got a few kind of from the last section that came in there as you started the new section. First one would be they were curious what prompted the change from 18 acre feet to 15 acre feet.
For the threshold, the minimum 15 acre feet.
Yeah.
So the 15 acre feet comes from the National Inventory of Dams. The 18 acre feet, we don't really know where that number came from. It seems like it was an arbitrary number that may have been a compromise on something else. So the 15 acre feet was coming from the Army Corps' National Inventory of Dams criteria.
Okay. And then we talked about in our hazard classifications, major roads. And so we had a question of, how do we define a major road?
Okay, so we don't have a definition of a major roadway, but what we could look at is it a paved road? Is it a US highway? Is it an interstate? Maybe some roadway counts. It's not a great answer, but it kind of depends on the specific situation.
Okay. There was a question about the regulatory thresholds and if it has to meet. I think the question is if it has to meet all of the requirements or any of the requirements.
For the three?
Yeah.
It's a or. So if it's 25 foot tall, it is a regulated dam, unless it has less than 15 acre feet. It doesn't have to be 25 foot tall and 50 acre feet.
Okay. I think that's what they're asking. And then there's a question, I guess, and this probably relates to the permit application, the permit tool itself, asking about will preliminary plans also be provided to the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers? I guess I can answer that. Yeah, permit,
Okay.
when you submit an application in permit, as many of you know, that does send a copy of the application to the Army Corps. So that's correct. Whatever you upload in that preliminary set using permit, the Corps will see a copy of that. So if they'll need more information, then you can follow up directly with them on a final submittal. And that's all we have now, unless there's any follow-up on that or any more. Give a second here if anybody wants to type anything on the last section. Don't see anything, so I guess we can continue on, and we'll take anything else at the next break.
Alrighty, thanks, John. So the next section in the rules is the criteria for approval. So we no longer have a external rule reference like Bulletin 16. Everything is inside this Chapter 73. We've decided to relax the prescriptive design standards, and because the way it was written, we had really specific guidelines for like pipe type, pipe size, design storms, and then structural calculations. We had no requirements, no geotechnical requirements, except for side slopes and top widths. So we decided we could either make it really specific and we would end up with a document basically that's TR60, or we could make it more general. So our first addition to the rules is an emergency action plan that is required for all high hazard dams. It's a document that is it's a planning tool for what to do in the case of an emergency or in the case of a developing emergency. Who do you call? What do you do? What would be an emergency? A tool for the owner so they would know what are things they could look for to know this could be an emergency situation coming. We have been working with the various high hazard dam owners to get these started. The inundation maps are the technical hurdle that's expensive and hard to develop for the owners. So we have been developing inundation maps for the high hazard dams. We have most of them completed. The design requirements, we did specify design storms just so that we didn't have to, we just set those so we don't have to have any discussions on design storms. We picked design storms for the freeboard design storms that match FEMA's recommendations, and we tried to keep our spillway design storms that lined up with NRCS guidelines. We also removed the arbitrary 2-foot freeboard requirement when you don't have an auxiliary spillway, and that will be covered later when in the spillway design section where it says it has to operate safely. So if you don't have to add freeboard, 2-foot freeboard to make it safe, but if you have a small pipe that might clog, that wouldn't be a safe design. Low hazard design, we have set the spillway design flood to be the Q10, the 10-year storm. To the auxiliary spillway, we removed the 25-foot or 25-year storm for the larger drainage areas. This matches the NRCS. And then we did raise the freeboard design storm from the 50-year to the 100-year for low hazard dams. It just matches what FEMA recommends and other floodplain protections that we already enforced. Significant hazard, the only change was we it used to be the half PMF, and we've reduced it to the 1,000 year flood. Typically, it's 2 or 3 inches less of rainfall, so it's not an increase. The high hazard design storms have stayed the same. PMF at the top of dam for the purpose of removing that risk of overtopping failure. And then the spillway design flood sets the auxiliary spillway at the 100-year storm. Atlas 14 NOAA Atlas 14 has been added as a reference for rainfall values, which has brought up our reference to current rainfall data. And then HMR 51 is still the current PMF source. We have added a section for incremental consequence analysis. So sometimes there's a dam failure event that may not cause additional loss of life or significant damages when you compare it to the non-failure event. So this would allow you to reduce that storm potentially for a high hazard dam to the 500-year storm, or to the lowest of a 500-year storm. You'd have to find the event less than the PMF that a dam failure results in incremental damages above the non-failure event. In the significant hazard, freeboard design storm could be reduced to the 100-year. Oops. And these are, the guidelines for this can be found in FEMA's inflow design flood document P94. It steps through the process and is a good reference for doing incremental consequence analysis. Spillway design requirements, we still have the same general first statement: the spillway shall be designed to operate safely. And then we have removed minimum pipe diameters, material requirements, drop inlet sizes, all of the different specific requirements that are in other design references. Seepage control, we removed the wording that suggests anti-seepage collars. That doesn't mean they're not allowed. It just means we're not suggesting them. On a small dam, if you can find a source that recommends them for the size of dam that you're designing in hazard classification, we would review that. And here's the nice picture of seepage collars in action. And then also for spillway design section, the high and significant hazard dams would need to provide some additional information when using spillway conduits, just to show that the pipe isn't being overloaded or is adequately designed structurally for the size of dam that it's located in. The auxiliary spillway, we have changed the title of it from an emergency spillway to auxiliary spillway. It's just a name change. And we have removed the prescriptive requirements, except we did leave 10-foot bottom width, 2-foot depth, just so we can say this is the size of a emergency spillway minimum. And then low level outlets used to be required for a major dam to drain 50% of the storage, and we've just changed that to be all high and significant. But still the 50% is the same criteria. Embankment designs. again, we removed all the prescriptive requirements that we had, which was just the top width and the side slopes and the wave erosion berm. But we didn't have any additional embankment design criteria that you could find in Tier 60, for instance. Your design references should be documented in the design report for what you've chosen to design the embankment. And the geotechnical report used to be required for major dams, and we've changed that to be all high and significant hazard dams are required to have a geotech design. Some different references. These are posted on the DNR Dam Safety webpage. TR6, NRCS, TR60, Pond 378, a couple FEMA documents, NOAA Atlas 14, HMR 51 for the PMFs. And then the last section in this one is dam removal and abandonment. We've changed the removal requirements have stayed the same. The things that you need to submit are the same, but we changed the definitions just a little bit. We used to have the rule that said abandonment is prohibited, but now we changed abandonment to mean taking measures to no longer impound the water. So filling it up with dirt, or it sediments in and you route the water around it, would be an abandoned dam. And kind of in the next section, the dam owner must continue to maintain the dam. So you can't just walk away from the dam. If you want to, what we call it, abandon it, you have to do something to keep it a safe dam. Is there any questions on design requirements, EAPs, design references?
None have come in during this section. I want to point out one thing too. We talk a lot about FEMA, and that might sort of surprise people because you might think of the Corps of Engineers designing most dams and having references, and that's all true. The reason FEMA comes up a lot, and you see guidance from FEMA, is that the National Dam Safety Program, authorized by Congress, basically is put under FEMA, and then there's a National Dam Safety Review Board that's a collection of, it's chaired by FEMA, but it consists of the Corps of Engineers, the Bureau of Reclamation, FERC, several state representatives, and they oversee the development of a lot of these guidance documents. So when we say a FEMA guidance or a FEMA manual, that's a manual that's come through that National Dam Safety Review Board and been seen by all of those federal agencies. So I'd point that out, because otherwise it's always kind of, we get questions sometimes about, well, what does FEMA know, or that sort of thing. So that's just a little more background on why you hear us say a lot we're using FEMA guidance. It's really from the National Dam Safety Review Board and the attempt to kind of come up with some national standards. So, but with that, with me stalling a little bit there, nobody added any new questions, so I guess we can continue.
Okay, thank you, John. And then the next section is the part that contains some dam ownership and inspections and enforcement rules. The dam owner must continue to maintain the dam, or sell the property, or take out the dam. You can't just leave it and walk away. It needs to stay maintained, and it needs to stay a safe dam. The dam owner might be required to hire an engineer to do further evaluations or follow-up inspections, which is a role that we already had, but it's good to point out. and it did exist, just in a different section. Annual maintenance inspections are required, used to be required for major dams, but now we've changed it to be high and significant hazard dams. It's just supposed to be a brief summary of what has happened at the dam over the last year. Make sure that it's been looked at least once, hopefully more times. Any repairs that have been done, any deficiencies that have been found by the owner, and if there's any been development downstream that could change the hazard classification. We're going to work on developing a process for getting those submitted, and we'll get reminders sent out to the owners to get those yearly reports to us. The dam inspection program that we provide is limited to visual inspections. That's why we have the previous rule that we could require further inspection by an engineer. High and significant hazard dams are going to be regularly scheduled by the DNR. We removed the major classification, so now we will inspect the highs and the significants. The significant hazards will be inspected every 5 years. And this, the change from going from only inspecting majors to all highs and significance will add about 100 significant hazards to our inspection list. And the high hazard dams will continue to be every 2 years. Impoundment level changes is the same rules as it was before. We've just moved it to this chapter. Unsafe dams, for designating a dam unsafe, and what do we do after that's happened for compliance. Those just moved over. Well, they didn't move chapters. They just stayed the same. They're just repeated from previously. And we didn't have many changes in those sections. Do we have any questions on dam ownership, inspections?
Nothing new yet. I guess you can go ahead and go to your final slide, and then we'll.
Yeah.
And then, right, we've got about one more slide to wrap things up, and then so be thinking of if you have any other questions, and we'll give a few minutes.
So our dam safety page is on this. Actually, I added it before it was uploaded or after it was uploaded to the documents in the presentation. But the iowdnr.gov/dams, that's our dam safety webpage it will have the criteria, and it will have the rules posted there. There are some references posted there. The checklist that I showed briefly earlier. ASDSO, Association of State Dam Safety Officials, is a great resource for dam owners and consultants. damowner.org has some references for dam owners on what to look for at their dams and what to do for emergency action plans. damsafety.org. Lowhead Dam Safety, since we talked about them briefly. Here's the DNR website for river trails, water trails, safe lowhead dams and Iowa ponds.
All right, we have a couple questions that have come in.
Okay.
How many high and significant dam applications does the DNR receive each year?
Oh, how many applications?
And it was high and significant.
Yeah, that's a good question. So highs are not very common. I'm trying to think over the last 11 years if maybe we've permitted 3 high hazard dams. And
Yeah, I was gonna
significant,
say, yeah, less than
maybe
five, yeah,
2,
5 or 6, yeah.
right?
Yeah,
I can only think of 2, but I rounded up to 3. Significant hazard is a little bit more common. Maybe there is 2 or 3 or 4 a year that come up. Those recently they have been larger sized dams upstream of a city that looks like it could be developing downstream. And then the consultant didn't want to look further into what kind of development is the city planning on,
mhm.
or a roadway. There's been a few with roadways downstream, like a US highway.
And then what is the typical timeline for the DNR to review a preliminary application?
We hope to do it within 4 or 5 weeks.
Okay.
That would be the goal. It had been slower. If it's somebody who had just been sitting waiting, we had 20 in my queue recently, but now it's back down. So 4 to 6 weeks should be a good estimate.
Okay. If a landowner is interested in constructing a pond without NRCS assistance, who or where should they go to for help from the DNR?
Was that with help constructing? Is that the specific part, or designing it?
Well, probably design. And yeah, so if you want to talk about the need for an engineer.
Yeah. So we do have a separate webinar already recorded from last year about the benefits of hiring, not benefits, but when to hire an engineer and what services they can provide. But we do, if it exceeds the thresholds, it would need to be designed by an engineer, just so that it's designed by somebody who has technical experience in design and construction of a safe dam. The NRCS, I believe, can give some advice on the dam, but they're not doing. I don't believe they're doing designs for many random people.
Yeah, I mean, they're funding, and they're on the line too. So if Christian wants to type anything in, I'll repeat it. But yeah, they don't do quite as many as they used to. But I think they can take some up here and there depending on funding and the watershed and that sort of thing. But yeah, without NRCS design, then it means that you have to, as a landowner, you would have to hire a licensed engineer to submit that design to us. Is there a way to estimate breach path and hazard class for loss of life, or is it detailed modeling required? Does the DNR have any tools available? So just talking about breach estimation and that process.
Yeah, so there's a couple different ways you could look at it. If there is obviously a house right downstream at the toe, we wouldn't need to see a whole breach analysis. We don't need you to prove that it is high. If you have questions about what would the hazard be, it would be good to ask those either during the preliminary design or before you submit that. We do have a tool that, and I don't know if it was an engineer that asked the question, or but we do have a web tool that we use that was developed by University of Mississippi that does it's a web-based 2D breach tool that will simulate a dam breach, and it will show the limits of failure and velocities, and it does give loss of life estimate, not loss of life estimates, but consequence estimates.
Okay, So, yeah, I guess the answer is kind of depends. So if the question was, yeah, there are tools for estimation, and detailed modeling is usually only required when, yeah, you're really trying to justify a lower hazard, either a low or significant, to really show that, hey, we've done this detailed modeling, it only floods 2 feet deep there, versus the rough estimates or aerial photography that show that somebody may be in harm's way. So there's kind of a level of effort depending on what's downstream. And the answer is, yeah, we can help with that. So certainly we're always open. We formalize the process and the rules about a preliminary application packet, but at any time we're happy to answer questions in the planning phase. So if you have a potential site and height of dam or that sort of thing, we're happy to work with you on those early on questions, and yeah, providing you any kind of tools we have. Okay, so the next one is kind of the grandfather, like, I think I'll read it, I guess. What if I finish designing and approving a design today as a licensed engineer? Will it be approved under the old permit rules?
The rules are effective today, so anything submitted today or anything approved today or on needs to meet the current Chapter 73.
Yeah, so we can't write a permit based on superseded rules. So, let's clarify how is a dam height measured? So I assume, like, we've talked about the center of the dam or the downstream toe of the dam, and I don't know if you want to point that out. I forget our exact language, and go ahead.
Oh, that's a good question. Let me flip to, let me see if we have a definition.
Yeah, it is in our definitions.
Didn't we define it as height of dam? So we define height of dam as the vertical distance from the top of dam to the natural bed of the stream measured at the downstream toe, or the lowest elevation of the outside limit of the dam if it's not across the water source. So basically, what could breach out of the dam? We don't need to include storage below, excavated storage below the dam if it couldn't breach, but just the volume inside the dam that, if it was to breach, could come out of the dam.
Okay.
Which typically will be at the downstream side.
Yeah. So and the question was particularly in steep areas. So you will end up with a little bit of a taller dam in a steep valley, because we're gonna, it's defined as by the downstream toe. So you might have a dam that's only 20 feet deep, but it might be a 30-foot tall dam if you're on a really steep slope.
And that's why the minimum volume threshold is in.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And then recommendations for estimating the Q1000. Is stream stats acceptable?
NOAA Atlas 14 has the 1,000-year, and it may be the only easy source to get to. I know SUDAS, I believe SUDAS stops at the 500-year, and their values came from the Atlas 14, but I'm pretty sure that one stops at the 500 or 100. So you would need to go to NOAA Atlas 14. StreamStats doesn't give 1,000 year.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it goes that high. Plus, StreamStats typically
and it
only
gives
gives
flows, not right.
Yeah, peak flow, and normally for the dam hydraulics, we need a full storm routing with storm volumes. That catches us up. Okay. With that, yeah, we figured this wouldn't necessarily be more than an hour, but we wanted to have the webinar long enough in case we did get a lot of questions or ran long. So we're about an hour in, and I think we've caught up on questions. So like I said, everyone, thanks for joining us today. We will post this recording, and we do have some updates to get done on our website to get Bulletin 16 off there and that sort of thing. But our contact information is in the slides and on the website. So definitely reach out to us as if you have questions. We are planning to work closely with high hazard dam owners on the EAP requirements. We may set up another webinar in the near future to go over that in more detail. But as many of the if there are high hazard dam owners online, we've been working with you, trying to provide templates and that sort of thing, and inundation maps. So that effort will continue, and we'll be working to help those owners get those in place. Anything else, Casey?
I don't believe so. If there's, send us any questions that you come up with. We'll be happy to answer them.
All right, not seeing anything else. I guess we'll close out there. Thanks again, everybody, for taking the time and joining us today.